I'll never forget this day. July 20th, 2019. Manny Pacquiao, at the end of round one, sustains a tremendous combination that puts down one of the top welterweights in the division. On July 20th, he would floor and send a shockwave through boxing by defeating the former undefeated top-level welterweight Keith Thurman. It was in this moment, Keith Thurman, at the end when the decision was being announced, realized that the amazing 8-division world champion, the man out of the Philippines, Manny Pacquiao, would shock the world and just set boxing on its head. This was the crescendo, potentially, to a Hall of Fame career, one that when he first started wouldn't ever be thought to be possible. However, who would have known that in such a career full of high highs and low lows, that after this moment, the boxing world would see something that would disappoint. Almost 2 years and a month later, a Cuban fighter would essentially last minute set the boxing world ablaze. The 147-pound division is one of the most stacked divisions in all of boxing. You can arguably say maybe the heavyweight division or the lightweight division, but 147 is a staple in all of boxing. And after defeating the best of the best, the creme de la creme in Keith Thurman, 1 year later, he would fall to Yordenis Ugas, someone that wasn't even supposed to fight him. So what I wanted to do was, after a while, after looking at the fights, after basically taking some time to really gather all the information, get a better view from a macro perspective versus being in the heat of the moment, I wanted to ask the question and get to the bottom of one thing. What happened to Manny Pacquiao? What happened the night of August 21st in 2021? A fight that was supposed to be, one, a benchmark for a new up-and-coming champion in Errol Spence, or a coming out party, but ended up being one disappointment for a future Hall of Famer and a legend of the sport. So before I carry on, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a history of what led to the ultimate defeat of Manny Pacquiao. So I want to preface by starting where it all started, the night that Keith Thurman, who was a massive favorite in the fight versus Manny Pacquiao, who was supposed to be old and washed up, Keith Thurman said he was actually going to retire Manny Pacquiao. And little did Keith Thurman know that Pacquiao would muster one of the most historic and brave performances. A lot of people remember the knockdown in round one, Keith Thurman getting shocked and basically dropped. People thought that maybe Pacquiao would stop Keith Thurman, but Keith Thurman would get his ass up off the canvas and give a hell of a fight, landing massive shots on Pacquiao. And Pacquiao had to fight his ass off in order to win this fight. He ended up getting a split decision, which a lot of people forget, but Keith Thurman actually won a scorecard, but Pacquiao ultimately walked away with the championship. Walked away with, 1, his legacy intact, 2, the pride of the Philippines on his back still, and 3, the respect of the boxing world. He wasn't any longer just, someone who's going out there for a payday. After beating Adrian Broner decisively, he decided to take on not just a good competitor, but one of the top dogs of the welterweight division. Keith Thurman was undefeated. He was young. He had power. He had the antidote for the lefty in the right hand, but he couldn't get the job done versus an older, on the decline Pacquiao, who really just shocked everybody. But after this fight, so much unraveled. As you guys know, Pacquiao is a civil servant in the Philippines, and he is a congressman. However, his ambitions in politics were always his first priority. Boxing was his first love, but his real love is the people of the Philippines. And he started to really take a serious role in his country, and it was a distraction. You found him fighting less and less. You saw that, especially when this whole situation happened, the shutdowns happened, the world basically came to a pause after this fight. I mean, who would have thought 6 months later to 7 months later that everything would stop? Boxing, NFL, NHL, whatever sport you thought about, everything was on pause. Now, during this time, I doubt Pacquiao was training. I doubt there were really any massive events being spoken about because nothing was really going on. However, once sports started to come back, once boxing started to come back, we had major events like Teofimo Lopez versus Lomachenko. You had just real good fights come back. And it seemed like the welterweight division would come back, where you had the fight between Danny Garcia and Errol Spence. Terrence Crawford was back in action. There were just so many things going on in the welterweight division. And after the Keith Thurman fight, those big names in the welterweight division wanted a bigger fish and a bigger name on the resume. And who else to call out other than the second biggest cash cow in boxing? When you think of the biggest stars in boxing, you immediately go to who? Canelo Alvarez, of course, no doubt. I mean, Canelo Alvarez right now is the biggest draw in boxing. But when you think of big draws, you think of Manny Pacquiao. You fight Manny Pacquiao, you're going to get a massive payday. So his name would just constantly be thrown out by the Errol Spencers of the world, by the Terrence Crawfords of the world. Any fighter in the division. I mean, that's why Keith Thurman called him out, right? But no one knew what Pacquiao wanted to do. Pacquiao seemed that maybe he hit the crescendo of his life, and that would maybe be it for him. Go out on the highest of the high, beating a tough, young, strong fighter in Keith Thurman. But as with always in all great stories and great careers, sometimes you just don't know when to go away. And that would be later shown in this, when he would lose to Yordenis Ugas. And we know this already. But prior to that, Errol Spence, right before this, defeated who? Shawn Porter. That was the first big call out for Manny Pacquiao. That was supposed to be the next big fight. You had Errol Spence defeat one of the best at 147 in Shawn Porter. And I still to this day remember that fight. Errol Spence beat Shawn Porter. Everyone loved the fight. Everyone was in awe of the fight. And apparently after this fight, it was a done deal. Shawn Porter had lost by a razor-sharp decision. But that September, Errol Spence called out Manny Pacquiao. And everyone got excited about this fight. Oh my God, Pacquiao and Spence. He beat Keith Thurman. My God, if they fight, how good would a Spence versus Pacquiao fight be? If he beats Errol Spence, oh my God, Pacquiao might go down as one of the best in history, because you beat two young in their prime champions at 147. Your legacy was already big. Imagine how much bigger it would be when or if he beat Errol Spence. But in the next couple days, everyone remembers the big accident where Errol Spence flipped his car, and then we didn't know what was going to go on with Errol Spence. You had heard rumors that he was severely injured, he was paralyzed. There were just a bunch of nasty rumors going around. So that fight would never materialize, and rightfully so. So now Manny Pacquiao lost out on a big payday, and it seemed like he was just going to focus on whatever he was going on with his life, maybe just focus on retirement, and he would figure out what he was trying to do because he was trying to run for an eventual presidency. However, again, the world would shut down and no one really knew what was going to happen. But the problem here is Manny Pacquiao is one of the biggest names in boxing, right? The biggest names actually maybe in the world in terms of sports. I'm not going to sit here and say he's Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi big, but Manny Pacquiao's huge. So it just seemed like with the Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor, even Chavez Jr. versus Anderson Silva, there was just so much talk about a lot of crossover fights between MMA and boxing. You know, the Jake Pauls of the world started to talk about it. Celebrity boxing just seemed to be massive. So Manny Pacquiao, after doing so much work with Top Rank, was finally with PBC. You figured, hey, PBC can maybe make a big fight for Pacquiao with that Spence fight, but once Spence kind of got in his way and got hurt, that was no longer an option. So why not go to the next best thing? Conor McGregor apparently ended up getting Pacquiao signed to Paradigm Sports, which they are the same manager of Conor McGregor and several other major stars in sports. And that was a shocking move because originally Pacquiao worked with PBC. But as you know, in Pacquiao's career, he's worked with several different promoters. However, I don't know what goes on, but Pacquiao seems to jump around. And that's no knock on Pacquiao. Your business is your business. You can do whatever you want. You're Manny Pacquiao. But the rumors started to swirl. Conor McGregor had knocked out Donald Cerrone in devastating fashion. UFC was one of the only fight companies that were actually holding bouts during this whole thing that's going on. And the world started a rumor about Pacquiao versus McGregor. And it almost seemed like a done deal. It almost seemed like Pacquiao was about to fight Conor McGregor. The rumors were out there. But then Dustin Poirier ended up fighting Conor McGregor, who was a southpaw. It was the perfect practice for Conor. It seemed like he was boxing a lot more than he, usually did. But now was his time to make a big statement. You beat Poirier. He's a southpaw. You got practice. You dominate Poirier. Then the Pacquiao fight makes sense. But like with things in history, sometimes things don't go the way you want them to. And Conor McGregor ended up getting stunned by Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier got a massive upset in Conor McGregor where he saw his leg break. And at that point, that fight's a done deal. And now we're talking about January. So Manny Pacquiao doesn't have his golden fight anymore. He doesn't have a golden goose to fight. Literally days later, everyone's wondering, who is Pacquiao going to fight? Everyone's wondering, Pacquiao hasn't defended his title in almost 2 years. Who's going to win the Manny Pacquiao sweepstakes? I remember being a content creator and constantly making videos where, Manny Pacquiao, who are you going to fight? I heard it's Conor McGregor. Then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Ryan Garcia, after defeating Luke Campbell in spectacular fashion where he got off up the floor and everybody seemed to talk about this fight, made an announcement that he's going to fight a legend. And at that point, I'm like, who's he going to fight? Manny Pacquiao. That was who he was supposed to fight. Then the rumors were going out that maybe it would be an exhibition and it wouldn't be legit. And a lot of people were like, what the hell? Like, he's going to fight Ryan Garcia? Like, why? Why the hell would you fight Manny Pacquiao? You don't deserve it. You're a nobody. You're a 135 pounder going up to 147. Like, maybe you meet at 140, but a lot of people weren't buying the fight. So that died. So now you have Pacquiao, who is almost 2 years out the ring, talking about fighting a 135er after you were supposed to fight who? Conor McGregor. You were supposed to fight Errol Spence, but you guys remember what happened with Errol in the car accident. So now things just get crazy. Manny Pacquiao decides to not fight anybody and become champion in recess. They said he was busy. They said that, a lot's going on and he can't fight, which is respectable. I mean, you're Manny Pacquiao. You've been fighting your whole career, right? But one of the main reasons why it kind of sucks now that you don't know who he's going to fight was because Errol Spence, who originally called him out, fought in December. Errol Spence was seemingly back. He beat Danny Garcia, who was a top welterweight at the time, and to come off the Sean Porter win, to come off an accident win essentially, and beat Danny Garcia the way he did was a phenomenal feat. Can't knock Errol Spence. So now you got Manny Pacquiao, who is trying to fight again, but he doesn't have an opponent, so he decides to just not fight. And guess what? Yordenis Ugas, who is a tremendous Cuban fighter known for his, in my opinion, I felt he beat Sean Porter, but it was a pretty close fight. So if you don't think so, I get it. So you got Ugas, who becomes the WBA super champion, given the fact that this guy, Manny Pacquiao, the legend, decided to be in recess. So now I'm going to sit here and kind of fast forward and kind of just touch on a few things. All of a sudden, everybody starts calling out Pacquiao for a June payday. There's rumors going around. Top Rank is talking about how Terrence Crawford is going to fight Manny Pacquiao in Dubai, in Macau. There's some investor that wants to make the Crawford versus Pacquiao fight happen. They're supposed to have like 100 million, and rumors started going around. Then you hear that Pacquiao's current promoter, PBC, is saying that no, he's going to fight Errol Spence June 5th. Needless to say, June 5th comes. Terrence Crawford's like, yeah, I'm getting the fight. Everyone's like, oh, Bull Boy is saying Bull Boy is Pacquiao's trainer / friend / advisor. No, we're going to train for Crawford. All this confusion is happening. And then there's no fight. So he went in recess. He has no fight lined up. You don't know who you're getting prepared for. And the Crawford fight falls through. Then you're hearing he's going to fight Spence. That fight seemingly is dead in the water. And then sure enough, days go by, weeks go by. You don't really hear much. And then the Spence fight is signed. And it's actually signed for August. In fact, August 21st of 2021. Now, everybody's going crazy over this fight. Errol Spence is a young, strong champion, a southpaw who is supposed to give Pacquiao his hardest fight in a while. Pacquiao hadn't fought in 2 years, but they were saying that Pacquiao's still extremely fast. You see him training. You see him like, hey, maybe the time off will actually benefit Pacquiao because he's older. Less punishment on the body.
So that's what we found, and that's what we're working with.
Errol Spence didn't look like himself when he fought Danny Garcia. They looked like there was something off. Fights getting ready. He's getting ready for Errol Spence. I mean, southpaw and southpaw. Pacquiao says he loves fighting southpaws. And then we get horrible news. Evidently, Errol Spence was having some blurry vision and got hurt in sparring. People thought, hey, maybe you could take some time off and maybe it would go away. He started to have double vision. And then the worst thing possible happened. It wasn't a hand injury or a physicality injury. It was his eye. A detached retina could potentially be a career ender for a boxer. I mean, I've seen it over and over. Several fighters have gotten detached retinas. Look at Abner Mares. And you potentially never recover. So, Pacquiao having to fight, having to know when this may actually be his final hurrah, ended up fighting the next person in line, the person that took his super championship, the WBA regular champion. Pacquiao was going to take on the WBA super champion that got promoted due to the champion in recess request. Yordenis Ugas was a last-minute replacement. If you looked at the odds, they were up to 4-1. Everybody thought that Ugas was going to be another Margarito or another Joshua Clotley because of the hands-up traditional boxing style. A lot of people thought that Pacquiao would, decimate Ugas and then maybe fight Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence eventually for all the belts. But the fight would go on. No one really picked Yordenis Ugas. And sure enough, boy, were they wrong. Ugas was a polished amateur fighter. He is a polished pro. He spars with Teofimo. He spars with the best of the best, Sean Porter. He fights extremely well against southpaws. If you look at his fights with the real Ray Robinson in his amateur days, you see that the guy can fight southpaws. He's a tremendous fighter. And that's exactly what we got. A young, in his prime, physical champion that can fight and neutralize everything that Manny Pacquiao did well in the ring. And boy, did he shock the world. Yordenis Ugas was a horrible opponent for Manny Pacquiao, given all the turbulence that he had. And I don't think it had to do with Manny Pacquiao being unable to win. I think it was just a combination of being out the ring for a long time, being a little older, being a little more focused on other things, being a little distracted, focused on one opponent, and then you get switched at the last minute. And the opponent you're fighting is a lot tougher than you thought it was. I'm not saying that Yordenis Ugas wouldn't beat Manny Pacquiao, but it would have been a better fight if Pacquiao might have been more focused or had an entire training camp to fight Ugas. Ugas displayed great angles, great power, and tremendous defense and discipline. Every time Pacquiao tried his middle-eyes combos, Ugas made him straight up and put him to the right, using his jab. And every time Pacquiao tried to run up on him and use pressure, Ugas was able to push him off and turn and just continue to reset Pacquiao, something that not a lot of people could do. He used that right hand to keep Pacquiao paralyzed because every time Pacquiao went to go reach, boop, right to the body, boop, right to the head. Eat this jab, eat this hook. And I felt good for Manny Pacquiao because this was supposed to be his swan song or his final build-up to the real build-up, which was Errol Spence in a massive payday where he can do whatever he wants to do because he no longer has to worry about money. And I think it's kind of a tragedy that Pacquiao couldn't go out the way he wanted to, riding off on his horse. It would have been perfect for the story if he would have just walked away after Keith Thurman. But Pacquiao, being the champion that he is, wants to fight the best, wants to challenge himself, and he really felt he could beat Errol Spence. And honestly, I still wanted to see that fight. It hurts me we didn't get to see that fight. I would have loved to see Errol versus a top welterweight. I would have loved to see Manny Pacquiao maybe fight Terrence Crawford in June and then fight Errol Spence. And then you have a champion that would be top level in multiple generations, which would have been a fantastic feat. But even though Yordenis Ugas shocked Manny Pacquiao, I don't think it puts a damper on a wonderful career. And that concludes what happened to Manny Pacquiao. He ended up fighting someone that he didn't think could beat him, and he was wrong. I do respect the fact that he went for greatness, but you can't be distracted when you're fighting top-level boxers. Boxing is something you have to be all in. And if you're not, boxing always humbles you. And no knock on Pacquiao, because he does go for greatness. But you mix in the cash grabs, the confusion, the not getting ready for the right opponent. I don't want to say hubris, but it's kind of cocky to just take on Yordenis Ugas, who's a completely different style than Errol Spence, after not being in the ring for almost 2 years. So I hope you liked this episode. Try to do something a little different this time. And this is Good Boxing signing out. If you liked the video, hit like, subscribe. And the videos aren't the best high quality, but I tried putting this together and I kept getting copyrighted. So I hope you enjoyed the visuals. Be well and have a great day.